Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Maureen, and I'm delighted to be your host for this exciting session. We have an exciting agenda and some really talented speakers that are coming up next. Just a couple housekeeping notes for everyone is that we will be recording this webinar. So no need to be recording on your own. We're going to record it. And once it's done, we will send you an email once it's available. You can adjust the volume through your computer speakers or through the audio pane. And then we encourage asking questions throughout the webinar. And at the end, we will go through those questions and hopefully get some good, insightful comments from the audience. If you do have a technical issue, you can also reach out in the questions pane, and we will have technical assistance available for you throughout the session. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm excited to introduce our two speakers for today, Jon Arnold and Shanda Mehta. They're going to be going over some exciting topics, so I'm going to hand it over to them.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. And yep, Shandan and I have been putting this together for a little while now, and I think it's going to be time well spent for the audience. Welcome, everybody. And before we get started, just one more small housekeeping thing to add that yes, we love your questions. Keep them coming in the feed in the questions tab. We will not answer them as we go, though. We'll kind of curate them along the way. And once we get through our set of slides here to give you the overview, then Shandan and I will kind of get into Q&A mode with you. So just be patient, but by all means, send them along as they come. So we're going to talk about 5 big themes today. Here's our agenda. So I'm going to start with a very short review of the kind of the today mode of conventional approaches to how customer service is handled by companies and contact centers. And out of that, we'll talk a bit about the challenges and pain points, of which we think you're going to be familiar with just about all of them. And then from there, we'll move more towards what we would view as the solution, the cloud opportunity, what it is, why it's important, how it's going to help, and then review some options and considerations for migrating to the cloud. And then we'll have a look ahead to the modernization kind of opportunity you have both for today and tomorrow. And as time allows, we'll handle as many questions as we can. So that's kind of the roadmap we have for the next probably about 40 minutes or so. And I think what Maureen mentioned as well, we're going to have a couple of poll questions so we can better understand the audience, who you all are, and where you are in your thinking and journey towards the cloud. Okay, so with that, Shandan, I'm going to get the first batch of things covered here, and you'll be chiming in as we go as well. So let's just talk about current state. Now, this should all be very familiar for you as either contact center managers, operators, supervisors, etc., but also C-level people as well who are tasked with understanding more the bigger picture of how customer service is impacting the overall business performance. So let me just go through this next slide in a moment here. Here it comes. And if we could just please get the next slide up there, Maureen. Oh, the poll. I'm sorry, we're doing the poll first. My bad. Okay, so we'll do the poll, then we'll talk about the conventional setup for today's. So we have, I think it's 4 polling options. So I believe, Maureen, we have to slide down a little bit so the audience can see them all. And we're going to ask for everybody to please tick as many as you can for this question. Which of the following are applicable to your company's call center or centers? So we have these, there are 4 options, right? And you should be able to read them pretty clearly here. And yes, people are responding. Maureen, I can't tell if they can see the last one, number 4. It's barely showing there. I
So
don't know if that
everyone
was.
on the webinar, please scroll down. If you can't see all 4 options on your screen or your phone,
Yes,
please
okay,
scroll down
thanks
with
for
you
clarifying that.
and
Yes, you
able to
have
see
to do
all
it on your
4.
own. Got it.
We'll give it a couple of seconds for all the responses to come in,
Yes.
and then we shall kind of see where we are standing at.
Okay, I see. Okay, it has ended, so to speak. So let's just have quickly, Shandan, look at these numbers on the options. So showing up the top two really, as you have indicated, folks, it's part of customer support and not customer experience. So would you take that to mean, Shandan, that that's more about the current operating state of contact centers are not calling it customer experience, they're just calling it customer support or customer service? Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I think a fair statement would be that the contact center fairly and squarely belongs to a customer support team,
Yes.
and is not considered part of, I would say, any enterprise mapping. Let's say an online company mapping a customer on their website to becoming an actual customer buying something, maybe returning a few items. It's just pertaining to returning that few items or getting support on the items that customers have bought. So it's kind of being relegated to a small, part of the company.
Okay. Yes. Yes. And okay. Okay. Now the poll has disappeared, but okay. But I'm going to cover this slide. I just wanted to quickly comment, Shandan, on some of the lower scoring items about SMS. And the last one I think was about integrating other applications. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that many contact centers, I think, are still in reflecting what I'm going to just talk about here. So that tells us it's a fairly consistent representation. So these should all be fairly familiar, but I think these kind of set up where the newer technologies have value. So I'll just quickly read these out. The current state that we are seeing is that most contact centers tend to be operationally focused rather than CX. And I think that top item on the poll verifies that, Shandan, that CX business level focus isn't really the norm yet. And also, yes, telephony centric, not so much multi channel. Many contact centers can handle multiple channels, yes, but probably not in an integrated fashion the way we see with omni-channel solutions. They're also using, of course, a lot of purpose-built hardware that's been probably around for a very long time, likely heavily premises-based. That's just the reality of how contact centers have really been built and evolved over the last probably 10 or 20 years. Contact centers tend to be isolated from the rest of the business. I think that's a fair statement. And that's for better or worse. It's allowed some very specific performing technology to be developed, which is good. But we're working in a world now where contact center operations really need to be more, integrated with the overall business operations, and that creates some challenges. And I think this is fair to say, Shandan, that contact centers tend to be run as a cost center, not as a revenue center, and probably having less strategic value than contact center leaders would like to have. But I think that's the way businesses have traditionally looked at the value of customer service and what contact centers are supposed to be doing. What we're seeing, our thesis would be that that role has evolved quite a lot in the past few years, especially since the pandemic. So I think that would be a fairly familiar table setting for most people here. So let's move on now to our next section, which is really about where the technologies come into play. So challenges and pain points. The technologies we're going to get to, I think, really reflect the limitations. So what I've laid out here just now is the current state. Now let's look at the realities of what challenges come from having that current state. And we're going to look at two different types. I've grouped them into technology related and business related. So technology related, these are the challenges that I certainly see as an industry analyst out there. So we have limitations about scaling to handle today's call volumes. I think it's fair to say that with the pandemic, since that time, volumes to the contact center have gone up. The legacy integrations that many contact centers live by are quite complex and have taken many years to develop and kind of get just right. But it also means it's like a big ship. It's hard to turn around when you have to make changes. Also, those technologies have limited ability to adapt to newer technologies or to have their own evolution path. So a lot of prem-based technology can only evolve so far based on where today's needs are going. Can't capture customer journey data. We'll get to that a little bit later, but what we want to get to is how the reality of what constitutes today's customer experience, which builds on customer service, is very much driven by data. And data comes in many forms. One of them is this idea of customer journey, where you have visibility into their kind of entire history. And that's very difficult to do with legacy technologies. And as we move a little further along, we'll talk more about AI later on. But as AI becomes kind of center stage for a lot of the ways companies are dealing with customer service now, we now get into the need for those data points to also drive analytics, which have many layers of value that we don't have with today's technology. So what we're pointing to here is that just that there are limitations to what current state of contact center technology can actually support. And that gives rise to some of these pain points. But we go further. These are the technology related ones. Now we'll talk about some business related technologies and market related, sorry, not technologies, challenges. So, business level, I think that's fair. There's an ongoing need to reduce operating costs, and there are many ways to approach that. How do you do that when you have these complex deployments that are very difficult to evolve? They're also costly to run and maintain. So operating costs include, of course, your staffing, your agent headcount, et cetera, but you've also got to maintain that technology on-prem. That's expensive. You also have a growing need to support digital channels. This is where, again, the newer technologies come in, whether it's coming over a mobile phone, over social media applications like WhatsApp, Facebook, et cetera, even Instagram. These are now becoming the channels of choice for customers to engage. And if you can't support those, you're going to have a hard time meeting customer needs. And that speaks to that next one. Those customer expectations are not just about what channels they use, but also what they've become conditioned to expect. And in today's always on instant results, environment, that's the digital world. Well, they aren't going to wait 5 minutes on hold. They're not going to wait another 20 minutes for an answer. They're not going to wait a half an hour for callback. That's not the reality. So today's customer expectations are really the crux of what we mean when we talk about customer experience. And we'll get to that, but it's different from what the traditional mode of customer service has been. And then finally, yes, there are staffing issues. We found during the pandemic when agents had to work from home, it was hard to keep them engaged, to keep them kind of part of the team. So we've had issues on top of the traditionally high turnover that agents have had in contact centers. It's hard to keep them and it's hard to find new ones, right? Customer service agents, that's kind of a line of work that not a lot of people want to go into these days. So finding the ones that are good and can do your job is getting difficult. So that's a market and it's also a business related challenge. And all of these pieces are interrelated for sure. Okay, Maureen, let's move on from the challenges. And now I think we'll get more to the technologies and the solutions, but we can't get to those until we have the next poll. So this is poll number 2. And as you can see here, we have 4 options for you. And just in case you need to know it, here's what we're asking, right? What stage would you classify your current contact center operation? And as we've been talking, Prem is still very dominant in a lot of sectors in the customer service industry. And I think Shandan will bear that out here as the numbers come in.
Yeah, we still have on-prem as a clear leader at 40%, and closely followed by blended, which is kind of hybrid, I would say, on-prem and cloud at 30 approximately, followed by CCaaS at 25% approximately, and finally, people who have taken their entire contact center application and are hosting it with a hosting provider or on the cloud at 6%.
Yeah,
So
not so much.
yeah, so we're getting the last bit of responses, and yes, the numbers stand at
We're
on-prem. 44%, followed by on-prem and cloud, 28%. We do see a lot of customers who like to retain recordings on-prem, don't mind having the contact center in the cloud, followed by CCaaS, 22%, and hosted in the cloud at 6%.
Yeah, yeah, and this I think you'd agree, Shandan. This is I think a pretty good representation of the current state of things as we've been talking, but also the point we'll get to a little bit later, folks, that it's not an either or story. You don't drop your prem based and just go, oh, we're getting rid of all that now and we're going to run straight up to the cloud. It can happen that way. There's a little bit of that in the market, but the vast majority do follow, as this number two response shows, that blend of prem and cloud. And that's the beauty of cloud. And this is what maybe I think the biggest takeaway I think the audience should have today is that there's many paths to the cloud, and you can do it on your own terms. You can have that blend that works for you because everyone has a different, level of deployment that they just are going to have to live with for a long time. And the other stuff that you need, you go to the cloud for that and you kind of manage them together. That's where we want to get to, and that's what I hope you see as a good outcome from this session today. Okay, so yes, we've covered these challenges. Thanks, Maureen. And I think we're going to move to the next section now. Yes. So, why we're here, the cloud opportunity. So, over the next few slides, I'm going to give that bit of that story about what the cloud is, what it's about, and more importantly, the benefits that you can have for your contact center. And we'll cover that on a few layers. So, let's just start with the basic overview as our next slide, please. So, four basics to just talk about here. Broadly, not just within contact center, but probably across any line of business within your organization, the shift from hardware to software has already happened, right? I think there are very few entities that are relying entirely on hardware anymore with zero software. I think that's fair. But more importantly, the hardware that we've had for so many decades that's performed so well, most of it has largely been, reinvented and and evolved into being software based. So now this takes it out of the CapEx world to the OpEx world. But more importantly, the software world offers a lot more flexibility and integration than the hardware world ever had. And that's become the reality. And you can't really make the cloud migration until you have a pretty strong base of software. And what we're trying to say is the cloud isn't something that just came out of nowhere, right? It's moving along a spectrum of technology evolution, one of which is this shift from hardware to software, which I'm sure you're very well familiar. Also, the fact that cloud, you're probably already using it in your organization more than you realize, right? If you've moved to Office 365, certainly with CRM, these are cloud native applications. So it's not like we're saying, oh, why don't you give cloud a try? No, it's more like you've probably been using it a long time already. And as it's building a track record, building trust, building a business case that you can continue supporting, now we're just talking about, okay, cloud contact center, there's no reason why you shouldn't think of that environment any differently. So that speaks to that bigger picture of the SaaS model, right? Software as a service that has emerged as that OpEx based solution that we is very different from that hardware world, right? Where you needed capitalization, you need long-term budget planning to get the money first to do it. That SaaS model, that consumption based, right? On demand as you go model is working very well in the contact center. Now, I think you'd agree, Shandan, it wasn't always the case, right? I mean, other areas of organizations have adopted SaaS for a long time, and it's been working very well for them. So I think this is just the next step along the way of evolution towards the cloud. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't require rip and replace to adopt the cloud. So I think that's a very important takeaway here. Okay, so those are kind of the core basics of cloud. And then we'll go to the next slide, which I believe is three options. No, okay, benefits. Okay, two sets of benefits I want to communicate here. One is the general level of cloud. which is really, these are like the core characteristics or attributes of any cloud application, not just contact center. And I'm sure these are pretty intuitive for the audience at this point, but they're all important when we talk about customer service. Scalability. As I mentioned earlier, call volumes only are going up these days, and with more channels, customers have more ways to engage. So if you're going to support all of that growth, you can't just keep hiring agents to do that. That's not an option. It's not cost effective. But the cloud allows you to kind of grow with the volume. That's the scalability. The reliability of cloud. So no solution is 100%. But with cloud, because you can have redundancy of having multiple data centers to support it, you're going to have a very reliable solution. So you have, for example, you can have outages anytime, and that's a reality with any form of technology. But the redundancy you can get from cloud deployments makes it as reliable as you're probably ever going to get. So that should not be an issue. Now, reliability wasn't always the shining star of cloud, but we're at a point now in its evolution where it's not a major concern anymore. I don't think anyone sees that as a primary objection to not go with the cloud. Speed, of course, yes, with scale comes speed, and that's critical because in customer service, ultimately, you want that problem solved in the moment, that first call, in as little time as possible. Well, when the cloud operates on a high level of velocity, you can get those real-time responses, not just on the odd call, but for every call. That's the scale thing. When you marry all of these ideas, now you can address every call faster than you could before. The flexibility of the cloud means that you can keep adding to it. You're never out of date because the vendors will provide ongoing updates and integrations. That's the beauty of the cloud. And I think you'd agree with that, Shandan, right? It's not a limited set of applications, right? It's pretty much whatever you need, you can add those integration pieces to the cloud, right? Okay, and OpEx based, we've talked about that. So, it just becomes an ongoing line item. And very important is this distributed workforce idea. What we had, of course, from the pandemic, agents were now almost forced to work remotely. You have challenges because you want to make sure every agent has the same tools, has the same kind of desktop experience, has the same way to interface with the supervisor. All of these things are not so easy to do from a prem-based solution, especially if you have varying degrees of connectivity that agents might have. So these are all things you may not be thinking about now, but the reality is you're going to have to support that atomized, right, decentralized workforce with the contact center. And this is again another core strength of what the cloud brings. And I think we can probably get a little more technical about that later, Shandan, especially if there are questions. But I think these are the core set of benefits that apply for any use case. But now let's look specifically at contact center. So now I've got a second set of benefits to talk through here, please. And here it comes. Okay, we've got four types of kind of end users who will benefit from cloud. I'm going to start with customers because they're the most important. So how does the cloud make for a better customer experience for the customer? Okay, just a few things to touch on here. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to get a faster response time. That's probably the most important thing that they want to know. They don't sit on hold for 10 minutes. It doesn't take them a half an hour. Once they get an agent, they get it done quicker. That's really critical for customer service quality, of course, right? Now you're better able to use that they can use their preferred channel. As I mentioned earlier, those digital channels, they may be calling in on the phone initially, but they may want to escalate very quickly to social, or of course, they may bypass the phone altogether. Regardless, whatever it is that their preferred channel is, that's what makes them stay with you. Because if you can't support that channel that they want, that will eventually lead to them being the end for them. You can get localized service. This is really important for global companies with distributed, not just customers, but distributed agents. So now with cloud, you can get local service. So whether it's in different geographies, you can have agents working from those geographies who know the language, who know the culture, who know the kind of the subtleties of communicating with customers. That's a really valuable benefit that you may not be thinking about right away, but matters a lot to customers. I mean, nobody really wants to talk to an agent who barely speaks your language, who barely understands your issues. That is not a good recipe for success. And ultimately, yes, you get more personalized service because cloud deployments can support a greater range of applications that help agents personalize service. Customers really value that in the digital age. Okay, let's go to the second of four audiences we want to show the benefits. Your agents, of course, now with these capabilities, they can meet the customer where they are, not just the preferred channel, but also on the level the customer wants. If the customer wants to know, their buying history, right? Their payment options, anything that they need to know to handle their inquiry, you can get all that information for them in one place. So now you can interact with the customers in a more meaningful way, deeper engagement. All of these ideas are connected. And so this is what leads to those personalized forms of service. Now, when the agent can provide that and the customer receives it, both sides of that equation are kind of in balance. And that's what you really want to have. And when you have that, the agent is doing the things that they really want to be doing. In other words, having personal interaction with customers rather than handling those routine inquiries. Oh, how do I change my PIN? How do I update my credit card? Agents shouldn't be handling those inquiries. They're a very valuable resource in the contact center. Let automated forms of self-service handle that. So that's what makes the agents happy. They will get burned out a lot faster if they're wasting a lot of time doing these kind of calls. And that's the reality right now for a lot of contact centers. And of course, by extension, they'll have a better remote working experience. If that's the preferred way of them working today, which it seems to be a growing trend, well, they're going to have to be happy working remotely, and they're not going to be unless they have the right tools. And that's what the cloud really does for them. All right, Maureen, let's go to the third group, which I believe are the supervisors. Yes, sometimes easy to overlook the role of supervisors in customer service operation, but they have challenges and needs too. So when they have better tools to manage their agents, not only can they cover the ground faster, but they can cover the whole ground. And this is something they don't have today. Typically, I think for call recording, they may go through only 5%, a few percentage of all those calls. Imagine with cloud capability, remember I said scale before, being able to go through all of the call recordings in an automated way, but now the supervisor has a much fuller picture of what's going on. That makes their job a lot better to do. With intelligent call routing, supervisors have less issue with the right call going to the right agent. That's a very important part of their job, right? And then, of course, yes, they can escalate calls more effectively, right? They have more choices and more tools, and later, as we get to AI, they'll have more intelligence to know when is the right time to escalate a call, because you don't want to take it away from the agent sooner than they need to, right? Because then that makes the customer think you don't know what you're doing. But when you have the right tools, you can escalate calls kind of more effectively, and that's an important part to keep the supervisors kind of on track with their. And yes, also you're going to have richer data. That's where the AI comes in, right? To train your agents, to coach your agents. That's a very important part of the supervisor's job. So there's a lot in it for them too. And then we'll go more into the fourth one, which I think is the business level set of benefits for that audience. And yes, so contact center leaders, and that can mean many different people, but basically not the hands-on operational folks, but more the business level decision makers, influencers, and budget owners, et cetera, et cetera. What their needs for the cloud, the benefits are a little different. So here are a few of those to consider, right? It allows the contact center to modernize without CapEx. Well, that's a pretty attractive proposition. Ultimately, when all of these pieces we've talked about work well, that should be reflected in better CSAT metrics, NPS metrics. Those are outside facing numbers that C-level leaders really want to see, and a lot of them live and die by those numbers. So ultimately, when those numbers improve, they're happy. Very important. Of course, yes, reduced operational costs. Cloud gives you more options for doing that. And again, that's an important metric for them too. You'll have less customer turnover, right? When customer service levels improve, that should translate into better retention. That's a cost to the business that hurts the brand, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an important benefit that they want to see. And all of this makes that contact center more strategic to the business because now you're not just driving better customer service, but you're falling into line with this idea of customer experience, which is a broader brush to look at things than just customer service. That's a strategic way of looking at how the contact center provides value to the business. That's great for the contact center leaders and for the operational people who now feel that what they're doing is more valued by the organization. Remember, I said earlier, contact centers, they tend to be viewed as a cost center. Well, that's a very transactional way of doing things. Now, if we're driving something bigger with CX, now we're a little more important. We have a seat at the table when budgets are being set, strategies are being made. So for contact center leaders, that's a really good outcome. And yes, ultimately, all of these things lead to better brand reputation. C-level folks, that's very important for them. So this cloud story is a little bit more than just automating, your service levels, giving more channels for customers. No, there's a bigger story here. Okay, so with that, that's I think gets us to a position, Shandan, where we can move to the next section which we're almost at the next section. Sorry, one more slide here, just to show you that cloud, as I mentioned earlier, there are many ways to look at it. It's not an either or thing. And even when you start getting into cloud itself, there's not just one type of cloud, right? There are public clouds, private clouds, and of course, hybrid cloud deployments. So wherever we talked earlier about, flexibility, reliability, scale, not being real, pushbacks against cloud anymore. Well, when you're comfortable with that idea of cloud, guess what? You have different options of cloud models here to look at. And I thought maybe Shandan, you might want to maybe comment on each of these a little bit because they're important decisions here, and they're not all carved in stone, right? You don't have to stay with one forever.
Oh, absolutely. So it depends on your priorities. And, there's a slide after this, and after that, I get into how do you actually go about migrating your current contact center. And while I'm there, I'll also touch upon that how the cloud deployment models can support, or you might need the support of one model over the other, and how you can prioritize and choose the one which works for you.
Yeah, yeah, good, good. So the seed we're planting here, of course, is just there are multiple models for deploying. So to wrap this section up, two basic implications. These are the takeaways we want you to have. So first, contact centers, as you see here, can now provide digital CX. Remember I talked earlier about challenges, not having data to feed and create your analytics, right? Not having data to track customer journey. These are the building blocks for this idea of CX, customer experience, and it's got to be digital because that's the way everything is going right now. So when customers make a call into your contact center, it's going to be coming into you over VoIP, which means it's going to be a data stream. Anything that comes in over a social channel is a data stream. Anything that comes over SMS, over video, these are all data streams, and you have to be thinking along the lines of cloud allows you to have those digital tools which ultimately provide digital CX. And that's that idea I mentioned earlier, meet the customer where they are. They have digital expectations, and you've got to be able to, meet them where they are on that level. Also, of course, I've kind of touched on this before, you can future-proof with cloud because everything we're talking about today is great, but guess what? 3 months, months from now, those will all have advanced and new applications will come. And that's where we start getting into those conversations about AI, which we're just in the early stages of deploying. and of course things like omni-channel, which have been with us for a few years, but these are the building blocks for that digital contact center, that digital customer experience, so that future-proof idea, because you can't do all of these things remaining entirely on-prem, remaining heavily based on hardware, remaining heavily dependent on telephony as the channel you communicate with your customers. So this is where cloud is trying to take us. So I think, Maureen, that takes us to the next section, if I believe so. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is where you were talking earlier, Shandan. So maybe you can run the next couple of slides here for us. What to know and what to prepare for, right?
Absolutely. So, thanks, John, for that wonderful, I would say, first half of the webinar. And I'll kind of also paraphrase that because that leads us into the second half as to why, how you should migrate your contact center. So, John took us through why you should migrate your contact center, and I'll kind of like allow you to picture it differently by thinking of a CEO of any company and with his or her relationship with the contact center. Usually it is number of agents on an HR report. Usually
Hmm.
it's his associates complaining to him about call wait times. Usually it's about him looking at customer support stats like response time, turnaround time, replacement time, shipment tracking time, and stuff like that. And that's it. It's our responsibility as contact center professionals to tell the CEO and the board and the management that, hey, from purely being a contact center supporting customers, we can draw amazing business insights into the journey of the customer. We can give you a net promoter score. We can give you the voice of the customer. You can work extensively on customer satisfaction just with the data that's being generated due to the uh, interchange between customers and contact center professionals. So it's our role to tell the management that they can view it as much more than just a support center piece of application. And how do you then migrate to this new world where you are able to convincingly go back to management and say that this is how we'll migrate? If you go to the next slide, again, you can look at these migration decisions based on two factors, business and technology. So, first, consider your migration options from a technology perspective. Look at the contact center piece of software itself. Look at the surrounding areas, the PBX. What are you currently working on? What kind of PBX is that? What kind of business applications does your contact center currently integrate with? And going back to the point which I said that I'd cover later, what kind of deployment models are available to you from your empaneled vendors or in your industry? And are there any regulatory requirements which necessitate that you keep the recordings or customer data or some data on-prem within the state, within the country, within the region? So number one is you consider your options available to you from a tech perspective. If I go to the next slide, you then step a bit into the business side and you look at your external vendors who are available and you consider things like, should I stay with the same vendor when I'm migrating my on-prem to the cloud? Which means I take my current application as is and just host it in the cloud. So nothing really changes except that you afford a project to maybe the same company which has provided you the on-prem system, and they take the application down from servers inside your data center, host the applications in Kubernetes, in containers, or in a public cloud, a private cloud, or a hosted with a hosted provider. You reconnect all the server identities, the telephony, and so on and so forth. You patch it up, and you switch over to now a cloud. You're not dealing with the complexity of maintaining servers and hard disks and LANs and WANs and data center security and power and cooling, and you have your entire instance as is. Uh, while we are on the business and the vendor perspective, look at options from a business side as well. Other vendors who are offering you many more capabilities than your current um, instance. What all do they support in your list of PBXs that you're currently using and your applications that you need to integrate the contact center into or that you wish to integrate the contact center into? And of course, do they help you with meeting your regulatory requirements? If you go to the third slide on this topic, you have to then build your plan. Now we get primarily into project management arena here, and here again is a usual like waterfall methodology of a project or a program implementation, or do you want to do a big bang? And there are elements to it which are highlighted on this slide, which you need to consider. You might also consider having a POC and a test environment, trialing that before doing a big bang switchover, which is a normal recommended option, which we will get on the next slide. Once your migration plan is decided, you've chosen your way forward, you've chosen your vendor, you've chosen technology, you've made sure that you're going to meet all the regulatory and other needs that your organization and the government might have of you. It's then the final phase of the project management where I would say I notice a lot of lapses across a lot of projects. So I work with projects around the world. People do a splendid job planning and executing the project. They also do a testing, they do a user testing, and then they take a step back thinking that the world will work just as fine as they have planned it to. What I would say is this slide is for me always closing the loop slide. Please close the loop by sharing 3 videos and 3 PDFs. No one gets trained. Uh, by doing a couple of user acceptance testing with a key user or two is not UAT. Uh, by doing a POC, trialing 2 features or 20 features out of 200 for 2 weeks is not a POC. And the most important people in the scheme of things are the agents who you have to realize are already hearing rumors about moving to the cloud, SaaS. They are tense, they don't know what to think, they don't know if that would mean some new AI technology which is going to replace them. We're humans at the end of the day. So please communicate and train them, assure them that they're going to get more tools to help them close more sales or support more customers or whatever the case might be. Get feedback from all stakeholders and make sure that the implementation team, including your vendor or vendors, have this feedback so that you close the loop. With that, these are simple steps, but we're doing so many small and big projects at a time. IT teams at big companies usually have like a list of projects and maintenance and that they need to do and contracts they need to sign. That they slip up at times, but we as contact center professionals need to ensure that we follow the steps which frankly, any project management needs to follow so that you have a successful migration and you now go back to the management and say, hey, money well spent. This is the benefits that I'm going to get back to you. With that, John, over to you.
Great. Very good. Yep, tells the story well, I think. So that brings us to kind of our big picture takeaways. So, if there's one word that we're really, reflects what we're talking about, it's modernization, right? We're talking about the current state where we started of how contact centers are typically run, how they're typically thought about, and that has served businesses very well for a very long time. But I really think, the pandemic changed a lot of things on both sides of, the customer and of course the contact center. And now we're in this world where modernization means you have to have more recent technologies and you have to think differently about what customer service means and how you benefit from these new technologies. And further down that is the tomorrow side to this is where AI comes into the picture. Well, we really should be doing a webinar entirely about AI, but I think people kind of get the idea of what its possibilities might be. But we really want to kind of set this up as a today and tomorrow kind of closing here. So this is the bigger picture that we want to kind of leave you with as kind of a way forward. So let's get the next slide first, please. So this is the today slide. So where are we at now in 2024? Our view, certainly my view, is that first and foremost, you've got to understand that modernization is really about cloud. You can only modernize so far with prem and hardware and for what most contact center deployments look like today. You can add things along, you can bolt things on, etc. But you're really, again, you're still driving a 1990, Tercel. You're not driving a 2024 EV. So you can only do so much with that. And that's the idea about you can't get there from here. You can do a patchwork of things that kind of modernize along the way, but you really have to think more strategically about this idea of modernizing. It's not just an upgrade, not a refresh, but you're thinking about the whole realm of what's possible with technologies and what it means for the customer. And that, yes, many of these solutions are in the market today. So that's where the today level of modernization leaves us at. It's not a wish for what could be, it's what is, and where many contact centers are already going. So this is not about something that's unproven. We talked earlier about, remember the broad benefits of cloud, reliability, scalability, etc. We're kind of past that now. And if anything we learned out of the pandemic. I hate to keep coming back to that, but it really is a kind of a watershed moment. The new stresses that that environment created for technology, I honestly, Shandan, I think you'll agree, I can't imagine a bigger test for the cloud to prove itself because of all the things that had to go into the cloud for businesses to keep functioning. Um, we haven't had that the dramatic shift in requirements before or since. And frankly, I think the cloud kind of passed in flying colors. I think every challenge that it was brought during the pandemic, I think it's pretty well addressed. So at this time, it's hard to look at it and say, I still have my doubts. I don't think that's a valid kind of response at this point to not use the cloud at all. There are reservations, yes, that are legitimate, but there's enough there that's proven in the market today that says, this isn't a pipe dream. This is a plan you can do now and will get you very far, very fast for modernization. It's the only way I think that you can frankly catch up. I often talk about the customer service gap between what customers expect today and what agents and contact centers are typically able to provide. It's a big gap and it's getting larger. And the fastest and best way to close it is to have cloud on your migration plan for technology. Okay,
Perfect.
we'll
Thanks, John.
end yeah, we'll end with tomorrow, but before that, Shandan, you've got a couple of kind of success stories to share.
Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left, guys. Please type in your questions. And since we've got 10 minutes left, and I'd like to do a few questions, taking a few questions as well. What I'll do is I'll skip to the through the next two slides in 10 seconds each, by giving you a very high level snapshot. Hitachi today has for its customers a local contact number and customers can contact them on WeChat in China in Chinese, a different method, WhatsApp in some countries, phones in some, emails in some, multiple choices in all countries around the world. And Hitachi's engineers speak only Japanese and English and are able to support their customers globally in the channel of their choice, in the language of their choice. All possible with in-house CCAS. If we switch to the next slide, state of Louisiana wanted to rebuild everything from scratch, and they wanted to actually measure performance because they observed a black hole of budget drains with multiple contact centers being managed by DMV, state police, running into hundreds. They wanted to migrate all these siloed on-prem hybrid cloud centers, put a structure around it, put a cost control around it, measure and improve performance, which all was again possible by migrating to Enghouse CCAS. These are huge contact centers, but we have contact centers with as low as 15 and 20 agents and 10 agents as well. And we have solutions around the world as well. With that, John, over to you, and I'm ready to take on questions. Uh, but last bit with John.
Great. Great. Thanks, Shandan. And, on that point, certainly, Enghouse and other vendors in this space all can cite multiple success stories. And what's important there, I think, Shandan, that makes it real is that these success stories are across the board. In other words, different verticals, right? Government, education, finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, etc. Hospitality. There's so many sectors that have distinct challenges, and there are solutions here that work for all of them, and also by scale, right? Large, medium, small size operations, they can all get those benefits. So I think that's an important takeaway in terms of the success stories. It's across the board. So that takes us to, where we want to go from here. So maybe next year, if we do another webinar, that will be the today, but right now it's tomorrow. And the big takeaway is, yes, we've been saying this a few times, how AI is reshaping everything, not just here in the contact center. I mean, any line of business, they're all going through it, but it's really been one of the most transformative spaces with AI. Contact center has long been one of the best use cases of AI in terms of where you get tangible benefit right away. And this is something that I can't emphasize enough. AI, yes, it's complex, it's kind of ethereal, it's one of these things you can't see it or touch it, and you have every right to be spooked by it a little bit. But when it's in the right hands, done for the right reasons, it provides tremendous value. And just what Shandan was saying, you can get real-time translation, real-time transcription. When you do that across languages at scale, all of a sudden that data that I talked about earlier becomes very important and valuable, because when you get data from a broad pool and you can integrate it and analyze it. I used that word earlier, analytics. This is what AI is really, really good at. Processing large amounts of data from across multiple sources and then identifying patterns and anomalies. Think about what that means for escalating a call when a customer is not happy and the agent isn't picking up the clues. AI can help do that. AI can help map that customer journey with predictive analytics that say, hey, if a customer does this type of response by this agent will likely result in the best outcome. So the agent doesn't have to think as much and rely on their gut as much as before. They can make more informed responses based on the data that AI is delivering to them in real time. So this is a whole new way of integrating data with operations. And of course, operating the contact center itself more efficiently. You can automate workflows, etc. A lot of benefits. These are bigger topics for another day, but AI is really the big tomorrow takeaway. And for all of that, again, you can't get there from here. cloud is a necessary condition to leverage AI, to make CX better, to make your contact center better. You can use AI to a small degree if you're only prem based, but it's really a fraction of what's possible and what's more beneficial to you longer term. So that's the takeaway I want to leave you with there is that tomorrow thought. This isn't just plug in one technology for another. This is a broader picture here that we're sharing. So with that, Shandan, yes, let's handle a few questions. We've got a few minutes left here. This is a takeaway slide, folks. As an analyst, I have a very kind of distinct niche in the ecosystem here. I'm not a vendor. I don't make things, but I help people understand these technologies, and this is what I do as an analyst in my line of work. But we're really here to talk about, what vendors bring. So let's talk about a couple of topics. Shandan, you had some thoughts about what we could talk
Yeah.
about. We do
So
have other.
while I have a few questions, we'll be able to take just one of them. So everyone
Yeah.
on the call, please feel free to email us, email John for any further questions or any kind of advice you need. If you need the slides, etc., etc., and please post your questions. We will revert to you with answers. And for now, John, I think the question which is kind of shining out is, will shifting to the cloud and operating a contact center there be more expensive than my current on-premise contact center?
So I might disappoint you on that one because the idea of more expensive is very subjective. In the short term, the answer is no, because if you've had a long-standing contact center hardware deployment, it's probably fully amortized. So you've already made the investment, and it may very well still be working well. But I mentioned earlier, those maintenance costs to support it aren't just high, but they're going to get higher because most vendors are moving away from hardware, of course, and supporting hardware. So the longer you stay on that route, that maintenance cost is only going to get higher and more frustrating. So short term, yeah, you'll have some savings, but you do have ongoing costs for sure. But you don't have to think about a capital replacement. So that's good. But longer term, dollar for dollar, Shandan, I would say once you go cloud and you that becomes the norm, longer term, you will probably spend more simply because, renting is always more expensive than owning. However, the the flip side to that is because cloud continuously evolves, you continue getting more value, right? So it's not a static thing like a PBX. When you deploy that PBX, its value to you doesn't change over time. It stays. It doesn't change. Whereas with anything that's cloud-based, the solutions you're using today will evolve and get better a year or two from now. So you may be spending more long term because you're renting, not owning, but you're also getting greater value for that spend. So I think the overall, price value relationship to the organization, I still think you come out ahead.
Thanks, John. So I think I'll call this webinar to a close. And by doing that, I'd like to thank John, the organizers, and more than everyone, all of you for participating in the polls today, submitting your responses, asking your questions, and being a wonderful audience.
Okay. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Till we see you the next time.
The
Bye-bye.
next time. Yes. Okay, everybody. Thank you for attending today.